Hey y'all, how's it going? It's Cyber Saloon. Hope no matter where y'all watching from in the world, I hope the vibes are good and hope you are staying warm. Over here in the Midwest United States, finally starting to warm up a little bit. We had some ice storms last week, but the weather's finally starting to warm up a little bit, which is great. I'm hoping winter is finally ending, but we'll see. Today, I have a banger of a recommendation for y'all today. It's one of my favorite, it's been a couple of weeks since I've seen it, so I can safely say it's one of my favorite films of all time. Not just anime, but just films in general. I'm definitely putting this in top shelf. I cannot recommend this one enough. After watching the banger that is Wicked City, I started looking at that director and some of the other stuff he's done. And I know one stood out to me where I noticed a lot of people were talking about how great it was, which is Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. Bought it on Blu-ray immediately. As soon as it came in, went down to my local theater. It was a Friday night after work. Went down to my local theater, got a big fat bucket of popcorn with at least 10 pounds of butter on it, and was like, it's going to be a good night. Vampire Hunter D it's been a couple weeks, is one of my favorite films I've ever seen. I did not know anything about it going in. And it is one of those films that after you get done watching it, you I went to bed thinking about it, and I woke up and was like, even when I woke up on that Saturday, I was like, wow, that was an awesome film. Wow, that was just such a great movie. It has great characters. It's visually one of the most stunning animation pieces I've ever seen. On top of just having just an incredible story, great characters and everything else, there are so many shots and sequences in this movie that even if this had mediocre characters and a kind of forgettable story, I would recommend it just on the grounds of its animation alone. It is an absolutely stunningly beautiful film. The world, I want to start off with the world. I'm not going to give too many spoilers just in case for those who might not have seen it. I don't want to give too many spoilers for those who might not have seen it. So the world of Vampire Hunter D is probably up there and one of my favorite just unique kind of worlds in anime where it kind of stays with you. Some of my examples that I love is like Dragon Ball, Fairy Tail, Hunter x Hunter, where they're very unique. That world, and it just leaves a lasting impression on you. Like Dragon Ball, for example. Dragon Ball does a good job at mixing fantasy where you have and sci-fi where you have these dinosaurs and a little bit of magic around. You also have all these crazy creatures, but at the same time you have this really utopian kind of sci-fi technology that kind of exists in the world through Capsule Corp and even without Capsule Corp, this very idealized kind of sci-fi kind of world. And Vampire Hunter D is, by contrast, it's dark, it's gritty, but it's also hauntingly beautiful. It contrasts it well. Whether it be from these dunes where these giant where it's one of the famous shots from the film where these giant sand these dune mantas come out, and they're these massive building sized mana monsters that just come out of the sand. It's just beautiful. It's hauntingly beautiful. They're scary, but it's the way it's shot and the way that they just go across the world. It's they've always lived there, and it just kind of something that kind of stands out. From you have everything else from it kind of has a post-apocalyptic kind of feel to it, humanity collapse to it, where you have a bunch of people tinkering around with old tech where a lot of stuff runs on diesel and stuff like that. Including the Marcus brothers, their vehicle and everything, and some of the kind of retro kind of it looks like industrial age kind of technology type where it's it's not anything groundbreaking, but it kind of reminds me of a lot of Fallout where it's it's people rebuilding civilization, and a lot of the tech that they use is very kind of stuff that they've kind of put together. It's not the mass produced kind of stuff that we have now. But at the same time, you also have these beautiful, just gothic cathedral castles, which some of the vampires live in. One of the ones you get to see at the end is just it's so gorgeous. The way that it was shot, the framing, the scaling, everything about it. As Meyer Link and Charlotte are coming up through the carriage to Carmilla's castle, you just feel the walls of it just encapsulating them because it's this massive just structure. Absolutely gorgeous world. You also have, and there's just it's post collapse because there's all these spaceships that are just lying around the world, these ancient ruined cities that are just kind of everywhere. But you also have these kind of rural kind of like old European towns that they'll ride across. Some of them are reminiscent of like the American Old West, where like one of the towns that Layla and Dee like end up in it reminds you a lot of like some frontier town like that you'd find in like Oklahoma or something, like in the American frontier. Absolutely gorgeous, and that's what I mean by like a lot of it, like it's hauntingly beautiful, where it's like it's this dark, gritty world, but when they stop at some of these places, you can't help but like take in just how pretty some of it is. Not even just like the gritty and dark parts, but it's like, oh, even the light parts are just like one of my favorite, like two of my favorite like instances of the world is like, is when Charlotte like gets out of the carriage and like you see those old like ruins of like an old castle, and like some in the way that the water is around that lake, and it's so just gorgeous and it sticks out to you. And also the scene of where Dee and Layla are like talking underneath that tree during a storm, where it's like, oh, you just see the storm just carrying away so much of like the debris and everything. It just makes you stop. It's stunningly gorgeous. I absolutely loved it. It's one of the most just, again, unique kind of looking worlds you'll ever come across in an anime. And I absolutely loved it. It's something, again, I would recommend it just on these grounds alone, just by like how just unique the world is. You're not going to see, to my knowledge, I haven't seen anything else like it. It's like, again, it's like a mix of post-apocalyptic kind of like humanity and collapse, but at the same time, it's like you have space age technology, you have gothic castles and everything else. But what the story overall is solid. Like it's very much like it's this odyssey of basically Dee going across the world chasing a bounty, and it never stops. It has a solid opening that it kind of like it story grabs you from the start when Charlotte gets seemingly taken against her will, and it just starts off with Dee being hired to go get him back from Meyer Link, which is the vampire that took Charlotte. And again, it's this odyssey across this just gorgeous world and all these strange and beautiful and terrible places, from the dreary like windmills of the Barbaroi to like all these different places they stop along, these small towns, these small idyllic looking towns. It's great. Like, again, like I love the idea of Dee's character too, where he's like this half vampire who kind of hunts his own kind. And like how people treat like done peels in that society. Like one of my favorite parts of the movie is when he stops at a town to buy a horse because his other one had died, and he talks, and the person he's trying to buy a horse from like talked about how like this done peel had saved all these kids in this village, and like the whole town just treated them terribly afterwards, and that he always felt bad for that, and it was like, oh, that actually was one of the kids that Dee had saved. It's such a good job. Like Dee is basically like a stoic knight in a harsh world. Like he does the right thing, but he understands that like, oh, like things are pretty rough in a lot of these places, and you kind of have to be brutal in certain parts of it. Which is why he doesn't believe, which is why he views Meyer Link and a lot of these other vampires the way that he does, and rightfully so, because in most cases they are pretty good. Has a great climax at the end. I don't want to spoil it, what happens, but it has, on top of just having like a great overall story of how it starts and how it finishes, there are some great like character arcs in the movie. The biggest one the most touching one is the one that Layla actually goes through. Dee she starts out as this just rugged, just jaded bounty hunter who just accepts this is how she's gonna die in life. And Dee kind of helps her like set her down a path in life to where like there is more to this. There's more to life than just chasing money. I don't want to spoil it. It's a touching moment for those who haven't seen it. They make a bet with I'll just say this. They make a bet with each other, and at the end the way that the bet ends, it hits you. Like it's really good. And I'm glad that that's kind of how the film ends too. The characters are great, memorable. Dee is an interesting character. He's a dun peel. Dun peels are half vampire and half humans. They're treated like they're treated basically like full vampires anyway. But Dee is like a stoic knight, and like he just in like kind of again like in a harsh world. And every time that he's on screen, like Dee always steals the show because he's just this unique, knowledgeable character, and he just gets stuff done. He works pretty well as a protagonist, and I love him. The other protagonist of the film is Layla. I would argue, is Layla. But she's like a brooding mercenary who's like a chip on her shoulder. But you understand why, and like you understand. It doesn't do the thing like it without spoiling. It makes you. There's a vampire character. Meyer Link is a good vampire character because it shows that not all of them are like completely scumbags, but at the same time, like it doesn't do the whole thing now where it's like, oh, like you have to feel sorry for the vampires. Like it makes you understand like there's a reason people hate vampires for the most part in this world, and there's a good reason why most people hate vampires in this world, and you kind of see that at the end a little bit with the main villain of the movie with it, which is Carmilla. I love Meyer Link. You have Meyer Link is the one of the antagonists. He's passionate. He's melancholy. He has like this understanding of like his race is dying off, and he kind of has this melancholy of this is just how it happened. Like this is how it ends. But that he wants to be with like the woman that he really cares about before he dies, and this is just kind of how he wants to go out. It's really good. And then you have Charlotte is a pretty good character too. Charlotte's the heroine character who gets kidnapped seemingly against her own will, but you see there's a little bit more to that. The Marcus brothers are great. They're good, kind of like they're a really good like trio of characters. They start a little bit different than you think they would be for bounty hunters, but they have unique designs. They're fun. They serve their purpose, and I mean that in a good way. It's a great film. I cannot recommend this highly enough. Vampire D is a masterpiece. It is a masterpiece and is easily one of my top 10 favorite films of all time. If you have love of any type of like, if you love vampires, if you love like just good story and great characters, you'll love this one. I highly recommend you check this one out. I cannot recommend it highly enough. And if you have seen it, let me know what y'all think of it below. And if y'all know of any other movies that are like Vampire Hunter D, Bloodlust, please let me know in the comments below. Let me know if you have any recommendations just based off this alone. That's all I have in this one, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.